Welcome to the Attention Deficit Disorder Expert Podcast Series by Attitude Magazine.
I'm Susan Kaufman here for Attitude Magazine, and you're listening to Attitude's ADHD Experts. If you're a parent to an ADHD child, you're living with more ups and downs than a roller coaster. One day you're basking in your child's creativity, and the next you're worried about his social isolation, his motivation problems, discipline. What does it take to be a good parent to an ADHD child? And it's a question that we all ask ourselves. Our guest today is Dr. William Dodson. He's a psychiatrist specializing in ADHD who has been in practice for over 20 years in Denver, Colorado. Some of you may have listened to his previous sessions with us, which have always been illuminating. He will take your questions today on parenting. And with that, let me turn it over to Dr. Dodson with our thanks. As always, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Susan. When we were browsing around trying to find a good title for this presentation, one of the ones we considered, and I still think it's probably the best, would be What Can Go Right? I see only adults with ADHD, so I'm looking at the end product of sometimes years of therapy and medication, starting in childhood and now with the adults that I see. So I have a very unique perspective looking back and finding out not so much what went wrong, but what went right. Because when we think about how to manage ADHD, it's the times that things went right that we really need to know. When we look back and try and see what made a real difference in the outcome, interesting enough, it's rarely, if ever, IQ, financial resources, social status, the special schools they went to, the tutors that they had. It really boils down to three things that consistently, year after year, person after person makes a difference. The first one is take medication consistently. Medication gets you in the game on a level playing field. I have never once in 32 years of practice had anyone say that they were glad that they waited to get onto medication. Almost always it's a real sense of regret that they didn't get it started sooner. Second one was actually the topic of the first webinar I did, and that's how to get in the zone on demand. When people with ADHD nervous systems can get in the zone, they have no impairments. One of the standard questions I ask to adults with ADHD is look back over your entire life. If you've been able to get in the zone and stay in the zone, have you ever found anything you couldn't do? And almost universally, what you find is that people say, if I can get engaged and stay engaged, I can do anything. The third one, I shouldn't have been listed third, it's really the most important one, and that is to have a person in your life who's your advocate no matter what. There was an article about 20 years ago published by Jelinek, who at the time was the chairman of the Department of Child Psychiatry at Harvard. And what he found was that kids with ADHD got 20,000 additional negative messages by the time they were 12 years old. It would be very difficult for anybody to overcome that type of relentless negativity and not have it have some significant impact on how they thought about themselves, their self-worth, and what they saw their future as being. Now, parents need to have a consistent message. They really act as the vessel that will carry the positive self-esteem of the child until the child's able to do it for themselves in their late teens and early 20s. That consistent message has three parts. You're fine just the way you are. You do not need to change for me. I love you just the way you are. But the second piece is, together, we can accomplish things beyond your imagination. A lot of times kids really can't imagine what the outcome of years of working on their ADHD and their learning disabilities will actually be. And so you need to hold out the promise that there is real hope, that maybe not as quickly as other people, but they will master this and have good lives. And the third part is you don't have to worry about the implications for the future. I will take responsibility for that. One of the most crippling things I see over and over again in people who have ADHD is that they are almost incapacitated by low self-worth and especially guilt. They just haven't been able, no matter how hard they try, to meet the goals and expectations of other people. The life of a person with an ADHD-style nervous system is doubly hard. Not only do they have to become competent in the management of their interest-based nervous system, it is over-aroused and disorganized most of the time, but they must learn how to live with and enjoy neurotypical people in a neurotypical world. They have to learn how to be competent and successful in two totally different cultures. Most people are hard-pressed to be at ease and successful in one world, much less two. It's very hard work. It's work that is best started as early as possible before bad habits and low self-image get ingrained and fixed. The problem, of course, is that adult-level competency is the hoped-for outcome of children. Children, by definition, are works in progress. During the most formative early years of development, no child, whether they have ADHD or neurotypical, has the intellectual development or insight on their own to actively participate in the therapeutic process. That does not mean that we should wait. We should step in and assist children with ADHD-type nervous systems. The earlier we recognize that somebody has an ADHD nervous system and respond accordingly, the better for everyone concerned. Growing up is always hard, whether you've got ADHD or not. If the world wants you to be completely different from who you are, it's even harder. The children who grow up without someone to support, validate, and guide them, quite simply, are screwed. We have found that the single most important factor was to have someone in their life who consistently remembered that the individual was a good person. This person has to clearly separate the child's worthiness as a person from what they are able to achieve right now. To say, in effect, I know you. I know that if anybody could have been successful through mere hard work and perseverance, you would have been successful. That means that we have something that we haven't identified yet that must be getting in your way. I want you to know that I will stick with you until we figure out what is getting in your way and fix it. Now, anybody can fill this role. It would be delightful if both parents were able to do this. However, anybody can be the savior of a developing ADHD child. A brother, a sister, a grandparent, a neighbor, a special relationship with an equally special teacher, and the more the better. Otherwise, we end up with people who have explanation for the way they are, as the title of a book, You Mean I'm Not Lazy, Stupid, or Crazy. That's the three explanations that are usually offered to people with ADHD about why they are the way they are. Some of the things that we can do to help build the self-confidence and self-esteem of children who are growing up with ADHD and or learning disabilities are fairly straightforward. Really what we're talking about is just good parenting, whether the child has ADHD or not. If you want to read more about this, just look under the title of The Resilient Child. That's really what we're talking about, is the child who can stumble but get back up, learn from the problem, and move on. We need to talk about the whole notion of self-esteem. If you talk with a lot of people, my sort of mentor in this is Mike Manos at the Cleveland Clinic. There really is nothing that we call self-esteem. What we're really looking at is self-efficacy. In other words, self-esteem is the product of meeting challenges and mastering them over and over again. A good example would be military boot camp. In 8 short weeks, they're able to take people from every walk of life, and by giving them each time the task that they can accomplish, they're just at that moment ready to accomplish that task. They have thousands repetitive over and over again doing things that they never thought they'd be physically able to do. so that at the end of 8 short weeks, you have people who are, one, tremendously physically fit, but also mentally fit. They have tremendous self-confidence that they can do practically anything. The adult in the child's life also needs to make sure that the child with ADHD or learning disabilities is not overwhelmed or set up to fail. Many times we see this in the school system, but families do it as well. They demand that the child do something that neurologically they're unable to do. Now, this is really what we get into the art of parenting, knowing what the child has just become ready to do for themselves, and the parent actually stops doing it so that the child can meet that challenge, overcome it, and have success after success. This is much more of an art than a science, and it really takes knowing what your child is able to do and not do. You need to also make sure that all of the impairments are known and accommodated, not just the ADHD. Because if you miss learning disabilities, central auditory processing, depression, anxiety, any of those, so the child is still struggling and has an insurmountable impediment in their way, again, all they're going to have is failure after failure rather than success after success. As parents, we all need to lower or at least delay our expectations and demands. Remember that the ADHD nervous system develops slower than your other children who do not have ADHD. Most children with ADHD are 1.5 to 2 years less mature than their age group peers. You may notice this in the fact that your children are wonderful with much younger children. They can hold their own with adults, but with their own age-matched peers, they're a disaster. They just don't get it. And at these ages, a year and 1.5 makes all the difference in the world about whether your child fits in or not. You also need to catch them doing right. So many parents end up catching them doing wrong. They criticize them, they correct them, and again, it's one of those 20,000 negative messages. Praise the successes and just ignore the lapses if you can. Always work through the child's successes, help them see their successes, and let them know that they can go back and be successful there again. We also need to praise growth much more than we praise grades. Life competence is a lot more than just making good grades. Social and peer group success, emotional self-control, a very accurate and positive sense of the self are also important and needed for adult success, and especially adult happiness. I know a lot of people who made very middling grades who are some of the happiest, most productive, and creative people I know. So at this point, I'd like to stop, open things up for questions, and see what people have on their minds.
Thank you, Dr. Dodson. A number of people have posted that they find that their child has a tremendously negative attitude, that in a sense they've already given up. In one case, this is an 11-year-old daughter who seems to have a very negative outlook on life. In another case, another person has posted about a 6-year-old. And I guess the question is twofold. Is it an ADHD trait, as someone asked, to be negative or to focus on the difficulties? A, and B, if your child has already had significant setbacks by the time they've gotten to middle school, what do you do to turn around that negativity as a parent?
One of the big difficulties of being ADHD is that the average ADHD person has a very high IQ. The average IQ of an adult with ADHD is 122, all the IQ necessary to go to a competitive university and get a doctoral degree. So what you have are these very bright, precocious children who, in their interpersonal skills, are about 1.5 to 2 years behind. So that there is always this rather long distance between what the child can imagine in terms of solutions and outcomes and what they're actually able to do. So that, again, the child sets themselves up for failure over and over again, just as often as teachers and parents may do that. So it's something that you need to put into words for the child. You can say something to the effect of, oh, I see what the problem here is. You're so bright that you're able to see what you want, but you're still too young to do it. At some point, you'll be old enough to be successful with this. You redefine it for them so that it's not, I'll always be a screw-up, I'll always be a failure, to, I will be in the future, I just have to be patient and work a little longer. Again, reframing it for the child, helping them understand who they are, what they're doing, how their nervous system works, and the fact that it's okay to be different from the vast majority of children around them.
I guess this balance is one that's so tough for our families. We see this very much at Attitude. When to praise, especially many parents are dealing with motivational issues. And many parents have asked, what about a child that I need to motivate to work harder? How do I do that without appearing to criticize and without, while continuing to sort of support their self-esteem?
This goes back to the very first webinar I did. Kids with ADHD are very highly motivated for what they want. Motivation that they lack is for what other people want. Remember that the ADHD nervous system doesn't do second-hand importance, what somebody else thinks is important. In fact, it doesn't even do first-hand importance. For people with ADHD, importance and consequences, rewards and punishments, are really nothing more than a nag. Now, they know what's important. They like rewards. They don't like consequences. But those three things that organize and motivate the neurotypical world are nothing but a nag for a child with ADHD. For a child with ADHD, you have to find how to approach them through what interests them. This is one of the reasons why with younger children, I strongly recommend Montessori-type schools that are based on the notion of work through the child's interest at that particular moment in time. I think just about every parent out there knows that if their child is interested, challenged, working on something they find novel or artistic, there's no stopping them. Paul Winder once said one of the major positive things about the ADHD nervous system is that people with ADHD have relentless determination. You just have to make the distinction when you're talking about motivation as who's motivated for what. If you want the kid to be motivated for what you're motivated for, you're going to have to approach them in the way that they can neurologically respond.
Interesting. Okay. Here's a question two questions about praise and positive reinforcement. Dan says, my son typically dislikes positive reinforcement. Is this common for ADHD kids? And Carol says, we've praised my son so much that he thinks he's smarter than we are. So how do you, positive reinforcement and praise are tough also, I think, to do right.
Well, first of all, it has to be based on reality. Again, catch them when they're doing right. And so many kids have this relentless strain of the thing they did wrong, their shortcoming, what they didn't do, what they forgot to do, etc., that it just almost overwhelms and nobody notices when they do something right. Sort of taking for granted they should have done it anyway. For a lot of kids who already have an abysmal sense of self-esteem, when they're praised, it hurts them because they feel that they're a fraud. They don't feel that they have anything worthwhile in them. And if you tend to say, that if you point out to them that they do, they somehow feel that's not really them, that it's just a facade, it's fake, it's not real, it's certainly not them. And so that's, again, where you have to put it into words for them and say, look, I know that you have an artificially low sense of self-esteem. I'll take it as you come. But I want you to know that is not going to stop me from loving you or having a good opinion of you. You're a good kid. And so you can, again, the parent becomes the vessel for the memory of their goodness. And it may be years before the child can join you in that view of themselves. But that's really what these special people do, is they are the vessel who always remembers, no matter what happens, that they're a good person and that there's a difference between who they are and what they do. That's a very sophisticated understanding for very small children. It's the type of thing that's more age appropriate for people in high school. So again, that's the parent's job.
Okay. Mary says, it's a post here from Mary that's something that's happened in my own family. She says, when I give my child positive praise, she responds, "You're my parents. You're supposed to say things like that to me." Help, she says.
Again, it's real. Point out that it's real. Forget the whole thing that you're the parent. It's real. And that's what you need to point out to them. There's an old Dizzy Dean line. I'm aging myself by knowing who Dizzy Dean was. But the line is, it ain't bragging if you've done it. It's important, and just say, look, that's my job, is that when things go right, to point them out because you tend to miss them. That's my job, and I'm doing my job. So I'd say, yeah, that's my job as a parent, is to remind you that there's also a lot of good stuff.
Okay. A question here from Glenda, who says, can you talk some more about how to avoid setting up your child for failure, or how to avoid putting your child in a situation where they will inevitably not do as well as their peers?
One of the things that I see over and over again when I'm evaluating adults is that 85% of my adult patients are missing one of the functions of arithmetic. At least one. They can't do division. They can't do multiplication. These are the parents who have done the flashcards until both they and their child are blue in the face, and they just can't do arithmetic. So what you do is, if you have that, you make the school aware of that, you make the child aware of that, and you give them a 4-function calculator so that they don't have to beat their head against the fact that they can't do simple arithmetic. Higher mathematics, geometry, calculus, algebra, actually doesn't require arithmetic. So if you can get them up to the higher math with a calculator, usually that's all you really have to do. So again, it's knowing what your child is capable of now and not asking them to do something that they can't do. Since most parents do not really understand the differences of their ADHD child, they tend to repeat either what worked for them or what they experienced from their parents when they failed or fell short. And the most common response is to admonish a child and insist that they try again the very same technique that just failed. That's one of the things that I want you to be aware of. If the child just failed, demanding that they try again and again is setting your child up for failure. You need to say, okay, this is important that it gets done. How do we get creative about getting this particular task done? Don't keep demanding that they do it over and over again when you know they can't.
Okay. There's a thread of questions here around motivation, which, I think is somehow interwoven with this question of taking on tasks you can't do. Parents who say their kids won't try at school, watch video games rather than go to school, want to do their homework, give up easily. What do you do in that situation if you're a parent?
Again, I go back to actually there are 5 things that get people with ADHD nervous systems engaged in what's going on, and then engage that relentless determination. One of the things is that if you have a real positive experience and relationship with your child, that child will walk over coals to please you. They really want to please their parents, unless, of course, they've got oppositional defiant disorder, then all bets are off. But the non-ODD child if they know that you carry that sense of them as a good person and that it's based on reality, you're not just blowing sunshine at the shirt, then they'll walk through hell for you. And then you still need to access their abilities through interest, through challenge and competition, and through novelty. Again, once engaged, people with ADHD are relentless, but they're not going to engage because you think it's important. Neurologically, they can't. It's not that they're being willful or oppositional. Neurologically, they can't.
What about the child who has ADD but also significant learning disabilities? This is from Kim. How do we keep them feeling good about themselves? And as you know, I mean, as you've said before, I think what are the statistics? Something 40% of kids with ADHD also have language-based learning disabilities. Some of them.
That's pretty close. I was taught 30% of people with ADHD have learning disabilities, 30% of people with learning disabilities have ADHD.
Right.
Again, it's finding that place where the child can have competence, whether that's a sport, music. Again, people with ADHD are very artistic, musical, creative people. Painting, sculpture, that sort of thing, horseback riding. Again, finding an area of competence and success. Again, not everything has to do with school and grades. One success gives you a basis to build on, and also gives that child the sense of, I am at least good in one thing. My favorite sport to recommend for people with ADHD are martial arts, because it is something that you can do individually. You don't have to find a team. It teaches tremendous self-control and bodily self-control. And it's really something that's very, very positive for many kids with ADHD.
Dr. Dodson, you've mentioned 5 things that engage the ADHD nervous system. A number of people are asking you to repeat those 5 things so that they can make notes.
It's interest. What's the child fascinated by? And that's what the Montessori school system looks like. Challenge or competition, which is one of the reasons why ADHD is so highly represented among professional athletes. It's called the Michael Phelps phenomenon for the swimmer Michael Phelps who has ADHD, and interesting enough doesn't take medication. Novelty, and that's just basically doing something new, different, but artistic and creative. Kids with ADHD have absolutely marvelous imaginations, and being able to work through their imagination gives you a universe to play with. The 4th one is urgency, usually brought on by a deadline, a pending catastrophe. None of our ADHD kids ever start a term paper anytime other than the night before it's due. Juices just don't get flowing until it's at the deadline. And then a 5th one, which is somewhat rare for children, and that is that they discover a passion, that they have a passion for something, whether it's horseback riding or writing novels or whatever it is for your unique child. Again, work through their passion, what they are interested in, what they want to do, and then you can tag all the rest of it onto that. Once they're engaged, it doesn't matter how they're engaged. Once they're engaged, you can then add on stuff that the standard school system says they need to know. So it's interest, challenge, novelty, urgency, passion.
That's great. That's really helpful. Sort of 5 keys to engagement and motivation. Princess says that her child is so aware of making mistakes and feeling, that he's doing things wrong, that he tries to cover them up or lies about them. How do they, and I think lying is certainly something that's come up before for us with the parents of kids with ADHD. What's the best way to cope with that?
Most important thing is don't shame them. Don't add the fact that they fell short onto the fact that they're a liar. That's a pretty harsh judgment. Remember instead, and again, this goes back to the very first webinar I did, is that there are two features that really, for me, define the ADHD syndrome. One is that the nervous system is based on interest and not importance. The second one is what's referred to as rejection-sensitive dysphoria. Just about 100% of people with ADHD are hardwired neurologically, genetically, that if they perceive that somebody even might withdraw their love, approval, or respect, they experience it in a catastrophically painful way, so that they're almost desperate to avoid that look in your eye that they've disappointed you. And so before they even know what they're doing, they've lied, usually in an easily detectable way, just in a desperate attempt to avoid that look of displeasure in your eye. Again, this is a wonderful opportunity to repeat for the 10,000th time that they don't need to mislead you, that you're going to love them no matter what, that you're going to support them no matter what, and that they don't have to worry about losing your love, your respect, that's always going to be there. You are going to be the memory of their good self until they're able to do it for themselves by the time they're in high school or college.
There are two people here. I just want to back up for a second to this question of what do you do when they say, you're my parent, you're supposed to praise me. There are two good tips that have been posted from parents on listening in. One, Regina says, I find that if I give my child specific examples of times when he's impressed me with his skill, his coping, whatever, it seems to get his attention because the examples are hard evidence. I think that's pretty much what you were saying, Dr. Dodson. And then Heather says something I think is interesting. She says, we found that what works with praise is to match the level of his intensity. If I get all excited and say, oh, that's great, and he wasn't so excited, he would be overloaded and reject the praise. Whereas if his level of intensity or excitement is low and I say, oh, that's great, in a calm voice, he can process the praise. Seems like hypersensitivity. I think those are sort of two interesting strategies that parents are using. Yeah, to get their children to hear the praise. A question on sports coaches, but this is one that's come up a lot. You know, coaches are notoriously tough on kids, and of course, our ADHD athletes are really tough on themselves. How do you get a great support system with academic teachers when the lacrosse coach doesn't get, quote, this is Charlene's question, the ADHD athlete?
Woof.
Yeah, sports coaches are tough. Yeah,
they are really tough, but involvement in athletics is incredibly valuable. If you have a coach and they're very limited people and the only thing they know is to castigate and shame people, see if you can find another lacrosse team. I have had a lot of my patients actually switch schools to get a different football coach.
Wow.
It's that important, both to escape someone who is relentlessly harsh and shaming, and to find somebody who is warm, encouraging, and that type of person who remembers that these kids are doing their best.
So you just need to move on, if possible, from those sort of negative coaches.
Yeah. On the negative side, I've seen a lot of people leave sports teams, and when they do, they leave the peer group where they function, and that is usually disastrous because they end up going into the peer group that accepts everybody, and that's the drug use peer group.
Wow.
Again, that's why for some families it's worth switching schools because they don't want the kid to drop out of the sports, and especially that healthy peer group where the kid does fit in.
Wendy's saying that she knows athletics are really valuable, be valuable for her child, but because he's ineligible because of his grades. And others are saying, their children are so stressed by the end of the day that sports or extracurriculars are really tough for them. Any thoughts on that?
And the first thing I would question is who wants to do the extracurriculars? Is it the parent or the child?
Mm-hmm.
If allow the kid to sample a lot of different things. There's no required commitment that you're going to stick with this for a year. It's go and see if you like it.
Okay.
And sometimes presented as, I want something that's going to be an escape from the stresses that you go through every day at school. Acknowledge that for them, school is not a idyllic, easy, socially competent place. They come home exhausted with all they've had to do at school. So again, let them know that this is not just one more thing heaped on top, but again, it's trying to find an outlet for them where they are successful, happy, productive, involved, that sort of thing.
Right.
So who wants the extracurricular activity is the first question.
Right. Okay. And here's an example of from someone, and this is certainly what happened with my daughter in high school. He says, his child would really like to do extracurricular activities, but it takes him so darn long to finish homework each night that they're hesitant to allow it because there's just so much stress already in the schedule. I think we can all identify with that.
Yeah.
So,
well, two things. One is to optimize the evening hours or the afternoon hours. So often homework is relegated to a time when the child is not on their medication. And consequently, an hour's worth of homework takes 4 hours, and you might as well have opened up a vein right in your own blood.
Right.
What I would suggest is on the weekend, have the child lie down and take a nap on the medication. If they're able to nap on the medication, what you know is that a second dose of medication is not going to keep them awake. You've proven that with this no-risk trial nap. Then what you do is you give another dose of medication. They can get through the homework in a very efficient way, and that creates extra time to do stuff that's fun. The other thing is to make sure that homework makes sense in your child's IEP. Again, a lot of kids with ADHD are so bright, they get the classroom work first time through. And really the repetition that your average neurotypical student needs is not needed at all. In fact, it's detrimental to your average ADHD kid who's already got it. And the repetition to them is stupid. I got it. I don't need to go over it another dozen times. So build that into the child's IEP, that they do every third problem or every fourth problem, that sort of thing.
Janine says that her son's IEP got him 2 study halls in one, so he doesn't bring homework at all. It's the best thing that ever happened to the whole family. So,
yes.
Sounds great. Question from Tom. What do you think about music lessons? I think I know your answer is going to be, is it really interesting to your child?
Yeah, and I mean, if they already are interested in music, great. Or you can get them drum lessons or piano lessons and stuff like that. And if the kid really enjoys it, wonderful. But if they say, look, this is just not me, let them off the hook. And you may have to look around for several years to find something that resonates with your child. Again,
right.
What they're already doing will give you a hint as to what they'd like to continue doing. Unfortunately, what most of our kids want to do is computer games, which drives most parents just really right up the wall.
Yeah, lots of questions about how to handle that. I can tell. What's your advice on computer games?
Well, you can see why they're so attractive. Is that you can keep coming back until you overcome and master that particular level. Ask the kid what level they're on in any particular game, and they can tell you what level they're on and how proud they are to have attained that level. And I can really see why computer games are beloved by ADHD kids is that, again, it's exactly what I've been talking about, is they get success after success after success from an electronic box that gives them a new, interesting challenge every 2 seconds. At the same time, a lot of these kids will withdraw from the world into this world of make-believe. Again, all things must be in balance.
Right.
Yeah. And so if you can nip that in the bud, if you can, from the very beginning say you've got, 1 hour on the Xbox, or if grades are really important to you, tie it to performance. If you get 1A, you get 1 hour on Xbox. If you get 2 A's, you get an hour and a half. 3 A's, you get 2 hours. So that, there's a reason for them to be doing well academically. You tie it to something that is important in terms of life competence.
Right. Okay. Here's an interesting question. How do I, from Glenda, how do I help my child accept and not be ashamed of having ADHD, be able to tell others he's a gifted student with inattentive ADHD? How do we talk to our kids about ADHD?
Now, I would go back to something that I said earlier, and that is to ask the kid, if you've been able to get engaged and stay engaged with any particular task of your life, have you ever come across anything you couldn't do? People who have ADHD nervous systems are remarkably omnipotentiated. They quite literally can do anything if they can engage with it. And they know this. And the problem is they can't engage on demand. They haven't learned how to do that yet. So you say, look, that's what I see in you, is that the real problem here is you getting engaged as the situation demands. And we're going to spend years learning how you do that. So what I want you to do is carry around a pad of paper, and as you're coming out of the zone, that you recognize that you were in the zone, that you were tremendously productive, your mood was good, your energy was good. Let's start writing down how you got in the zone and could be superhuman. Because when you're presented with a task that isn't interesting or challenging, we're going to go back and say, okay, how were you successful? How did you successfully get in the zone? How did you successfully get this piece of work done, etc.? And so you work through their successes, not their failures, and you're constantly teaching them your nervous system works perfectly well, it's just not the majority. You don't have a damaged nervous system, you have a second nervous system.
Interesting. Okay. Question from Shanna. Her 4th grade son, this sounds like an example of shaming. He gets very discouraged because he gets in trouble constantly at school. It's usually for little things like forgetting to bring his homework home or forgetting to keep his desk organized. This is such a constant among our families. The famous, homework genie that has been mentioned before that eats homework. Would it be beneficial for me to ask his teachers not to punish him for these incidents? On the other hand, aren't these the kinds of things the skills he does need to learn? There's a classic example of attention, I think, around accommodating ADHD versus dealing with learning new skills and mastering the life skills that you need.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, this is where an IEP is invaluable, that you can force, if you have to, things where you don't ask the kid to do things that they can't do. You know they can't remember right now to turn in the homework. So what you do is you arrange to, as soon as the homework's done at home, it gets faxed to the teacher. The kid doesn't have to remember it. Or that it's the teacher's job to ask the child give me your homework right now. Don't go past go. Don't collect $200. Give me your homework right now. And it's just such a small modification that, again, it gets the child in a habit, a routine of doing things. And it's not earth-shattering. It's just turning in the homework while it's there.
Right.
So many kids with ADHD, out of sight is out of mind. If they don't see it, it doesn't exist. And until that ability develops to remember that they've got homework, asking them to do that is just something that neurologically it's highly unlikely that they're going to do. So don't ask them to do it. Put it in their IEP.
There are a number of people who have asked questions about IEPs and 504s, specifically what are the best accommodations that are there some general accommodations that you would suggest? And then secondarily, a couple of people whose children's IEPs they're sort of talking about taking them away because they seem to be doing better. They're concerned about going to 504 plans. In your experience, is 504, can it be as helpful as IEP? Should parents negotiate for specific accommodations in 504 plans?
Okay. The answer is, of course, yes. One of the ones that's very important is, again, negotiating on homework. Is your child the type of child that does benefit from homework? Most ADHD kids don't. For them, it is just hopelessly boring repetition. And so you can, if you want, say he can do other things to show his mastery of this. Or just say he does every third problem or every fourth or something like that. Again, is the homework, is what's being demanded of the child something he can do, and is it actually helpful to his academic development? If it's not, get rid of it. The kid's got a hard enough life. Another thing, and this is very important, is that the child gets to choose their next grade's teacher. If you have a choice of 4 or 5 teachers, and one is dynamic and funny and engaging and does a lot of different things in the schoolroom, versus one who just drones on and lectures, and as part of that, read the book, listen to the lecture, take the test mentality, they're just going to die in that class. So, and this is something that's important all the way through college, med school, law school, whatever, is that when there is a choice, the person with ADHD is allowed to register first and choose the bright, engaging, interesting teachers. That one, if you let anything else go, that one's the one to keep. Because a kid will make an A with a bright, engaging, funny teacher and will struggle to make a D with somebody who's just incredibly boring and can tell you exactly how many minutes it is till they retire.
I will tell you that RateMyProfessors.com has been a lifesaver for my ADHD daughter who's in college. She checks out all the professors online and then picks the ones that get rave reviews for being interesting and picks her classes that way, and it's made a big difference. So
yeah, RateMyProfessors.com. Yeah, that's invaluable. I actually have my daughter go and actually sit through a class, see what it's really like. Because a lot of RateMyProfessor.com is somebody who has an axe to grind. You'll find as many rave reviews as negative. Actually go and see for yourself to make sure it fits your personality.
I want to turn a little bit to behavior problems. ODD, kids with ODD, is there any special parenting advice you'd offer to parents whose kids are oppositional, defiant, discipline problems?
In the United States, we are a very judgmental people. And we prefer to see oppositional defiant disorder as bad kids, bad parenting, or both. Everywhere else in the world, oppositional defiant disorder is seen to be a genetic inherited condition that runs in families, that has a biologic marker. People with ODD do not have metabolites of serotonin in their cerebral spinal fluid. And then about 75% of these kids with oppositional defiant disorder can be treated with atypical neuroleptics. And the three that actually have a literature are Abilify, Risperdal, and olanzapine and Zyprexa. And when these medications work, they work literally within 5 to 7 days. You've almost got a different kid. So medication gets you in the game on a level playing field, but these kids still need to learn how to get along with other people. For those people who don't know what ODD is it's again a genetic, neurologic, hardwired condition in the human brain where these children and adults are hardwired that they see somebody being authoritarian, telling them what to do, they must, it's obligatory, they must thwart that person. Consequently, there's no alliance to let's do better. The goal for the ODD person is to defeat the parent. And whenever I have parents who say, look, one of us has got to leave this house. We cannot live together anymore. I know that oppositional defiant disorder is at play. It's the one thing I know that can overcome the parent-child bond. And so consequently, usually the management of ODD comes first. The kid will not take the medication for ADHD or even give you accurate feedback about what effect medication has until you've treated the oppositional defiant disorder. Once you get the medication in them, for small children, here we're talking about ages 12 to 14 and younger, there's a book by Russ Barkley called The Defiant Child, and you can get that from addwarehouse.com. It's a perennial bestseller. For adolescents, there's one and only one program that has shown effectiveness, and it's the REST program, the Real Economy System for Teens, by Stein and Smith. And if you go to Amazon, they actually have a book called the REST program.
And the names of the authors?
Smith and Stein. I've forgotten their first names. And it is the only program that in research settings has been able to show it works, basically because it puts the oppositional defiant adolescent in a position where they have no one to thwart.
Right.
It just disengages. But both of those systems actually work.
Okay. In terms of therapy, there's one question about does talk therapy work for kids with ADHD in terms of self-esteem, and another question which is related, which is what's the best way to start when you have a child who has motivation and self-esteem issues, a psychiatrist, psychologist, or other professional? How do you determine the right resources for your child?
There is no specific degree, MD, PhD, PsyD, counselor, whatever, that conveys competence in ADHD. The place where I usually start is I go to the local CHAD meeting. CHAD is Children and Adults with ADD. They're found on the web at chad.org. And I go there and I talk to the other families that show up for the meeting because they were right where I was a year ago. They know from personal experience who's good, who's not, who gets results, who doesn't. Let them be your guide. Peter Jensen, who is one of the great names in ADHD research, published something about 3-4 years ago that the average family went through 11 clinicians before they found one that they thought was competent to treat their child's ADHD. There are not a lot of competent people out there. So cut that process short by going to a CHAD meeting, or if you're an adult, go to an NADDA meeting and find out who knows what they're doing in your general locale.
That's great advice. Peter Jensen's book, by the way, is terrific on parenting children with ADHD. Really.
Basically, if you're fighting with the schools or preparing to do so, his book is Making the System Work
Right.
for Your Child. And Jensen is spelled with two E's, Jensen. And his book is absolutely marvelous. Anything you want to know is in that book.
That's really terrific. Yep. Okay, well, I think we're coming to a close. This has been really a terrific webinar. Lots of praise here. Quote, great information. All I can say is, wow, this is the best info in an hour that I've ever been a part of. So, Dr. Dodson, awesome. Thank you again.
For more Attitude podcasts and information on living well with attention deficit, visit attitudemag.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com.